Things feel pretty tense as we head towards May 9th, Victory Day in Moscow. It's clearly more than just, an anniversary.
Absolutely. Our sources are showing it's become this real strategic focal point in the Russia-Ukraine war right now.
So for this deep dive, we're going to try and unpack some of that complexity. We're looking at reports on ceasefire talks, safety worries in Moscow, what it all means for the U.S. quite a bit.
Yeah, we've pulled from quite a range. Bloomberg, Strat News Global, AP, Newsweek, Daily Express, even Reddit threads, plus analyses from places like the Hungarian Conservative, Asia Times, and the Robert Lansing Institute.
The goal is really just to piece together a clearer picture for you from all these different angles.
Right, to give you the core understanding of what's happening.
Okay, so let's dive right in. This proposed 72-hour ceasefire from Putin, timed very specifically May 8th to 10th, 2025. That covers Victory Day, May 9th, and there are reports Xi Jinping might be in Moscow then.
Exactly. The timing is very pointed. Strat News Global and others detailed it as this short 3-day pause, ostensibly for the 80th anniversary of the WWII victory.
But Zelensky's reaction was swift.
Oh, immediate rejection. He said Ukraine would only even consider a ceasefire if it was at least 30 days long. He essentially called it out as, not a serious offer, more like political theater for Xi's visit.
Just trying to look good for the cameras in Red Square, basically.
That seems to be the Ukrainian perspective, yes. It really shows how far apart they are and how they even see the possibility of pausing the fighting.
And it wasn't just the length of the proposed ceasefire, was it? Zelenskyy also brought up safety concerns for any leaders who might actually go to Moscow.
He did. That was a significant part of his response. He said, look, Ukraine can't guarantee the safety of foreign leaders in Moscow on May 9th.
Because it's Russian territory.
Right. He was implying, if something happened, some kind of incident, maybe even a provocation like a fire or an explosion, Russia could easily just blame Ukraine, even if Kyiv had nothing to do with it.
Which, predictably, didn't go over well in Moscow.
No, Russia's foreign ministry called it a direct threat. It just highlights the massive distrust, how easily things get twisted.
And the Kremlin pushed back hard.
They demanded a clear response from Kyiv on the ceasefire proposal, calling Zelenskyy's reaction vague and historically inaccurate. And then Dmitry Medvedev, he really ramped it up.
What did he say?
He warned that if Ukraine did attack Moscow during the May 9th events, Kyiv itself might not survive until May 10th. Stark language.
Wow. Okay. That underscores the stakes. Now, about May 9th itself, it seems to have this almost mythical importance in Russia beyond just remembering history. The Robert Lansing Institute has some interesting thoughts on this.
Yeah, they talk about this concept of militarized memory. It's basically how the Kremlin strategically uses history, particularly WWII, for its current political and military goals.
So May 9th isn't just a parade, it's a tool.
According to the Institute, yes. They argue that having international leaders show up for Victory Day could be spun by Russia, used as proof that Europe isn't united, or even that some countries support Russia's actions.
Which creates a real dilemma for foreign leaders, doesn't it? Attend and risk being used to propaganda, or don't attend, and, well, that sends another message.
Exactly. It puts Western policymakers in a tough spot.
So what does the Robert Lansing Institute suggest? How can countries counter this potential manipulation if their leaders do go?
They have a few recommendations. First, launch targeted communication campaigns before the event to sort of pre-bunk any Kremlin spin. Frame the visit on their own terms.
Get ahead of the narrative.
Right. Second, be ready to issue immediate real-time corrections if Russian state media starts misrepresenting the EU's position or the leader's presence.
Okay. And third?
And third, make it clear that if Russia does use these visits to justify more aggression or escalate, there will be consequences, specifically expanding sanctions, maybe even targeting Russia's information warfare operations directly.
Interesting. Let's shift gears a bit, talk about the money. There's an analysis from the American Enterprise Institute, AEI, reported by Bloomberg. It looks at the financial angle for the U.S.
Yeah, this one might surprise some people. AEI, which is generally seen as more conservative-leaning, argues that it would actually cost the U.S. more financially if Ukraine were to be defeated compared to continuing aid.
More. How so?
Their analysis looks ahead. They project what would happen to the Pentagon budget if Russia wins, the ripple effects on U.S. security needs, not just in Europe, but globally. The argument is that dealing with an emboldened, victorious Russia long-term would be vastly more expensive.
So the aid now, while significant, is seen as an investment to avoid much larger costs down the road.
That's the core argument. AEI concludes that supporting Ukraine now is actually in America's own best financial interest. The short-term cost of aid, they say, is less than the long-term cost of a Russian victory.
Okay, let's rewind slightly to earlier this year, February 2025. There was a lot of noise around former President Trump's position and a meeting with Zelenskyy.
Yes, that definitely made waves. According to AP and others, Trump called for an immediate ceasefire back in February. This came after what was reported as a pretty tense Oval Office meeting with President Zelenskyy.
And the report suggested Trump issued something of an ultimatum.
The reporting indicated Trump warned Zelenskyy to basically make peace soon or risk losing American support.
And weren't there other comments from the administration around that time? I remember hearing about the vice president.
Right. Vice President J.D. Vance reportedly described Zelenskyy as disrespectful during that visit and questioned if Ukraine was showing enough gratitude for U.S. help.
And didn't a planned deal signing get canceled too?
It did. A minerals deal signing between the U.S. and Ukraine was apparently called off right after that Oval Office meeting. It all painted a picture of significantly increased friction.
How did others react, both internationally and within the U.S.?
It was quite a mixed bag. European leaders were quick to say they'd continue supporting Ukraine regardless. In the U.S., you had 14 Democratic governors put out a statement backing Ukraine. You had Ukrainian regional officials supporting Zelenskyy. But then some U.S. lawmakers, like Hakeem Jeffries, criticized Trump's handling of it.
But not universal criticism.
No. Some Republican senators praised Trump's stance.
Yeah.
Russian officials also seemed pleased. And you had figures like Elon Musk weighing in, saying Zelenskyy had, quote, destroyed himself with Americans.
And Zelenskyy canceled a think tank appearance after that White House meeting, right?
Yes, that got canceled too. It really highlighted the fallout from that whole episode. Definitely a moment of high tension and uncertainty about the future of U.S. support.
Okay, one last major piece here. The Russia-China relationship. It's constantly being analyzed.
Yeah.
Asia Times had an interesting take on the strategy involved.
Yeah, the Asia Times piece looked at this idea, should the West try to sort of pull Russia away from China, offer concessions to Moscow to weaken the Beijing-Moscow axis?
The old divide and conquer strategy, essentially.
Kind of. The article acknowledges the strategic appeal. If you could separate them, maybe the U.S. could focus more on China. But it concludes the chances of that actually working right now are pretty low, and the potential costs are high.
Why is that bond seen as so strong? What's Russia getting out of it that makes it hard to break?
Well, it's multifaceted. There's the defense partnership, which is crucial. China is Russia's top trade partner now. They share an ideological outlook, this sort of anti-Western stance.
Right.
China helps Russia with de-dollarization efforts. They share surveillance tech. Plus, it gives Russia a secure border on one massive flank. And don't forget the personal relationship between Xi and Putin. That goes back years, well before the 2014 Crimea invasion.
So the argument is that just offering Russia incentives, the carrots, probably won't be enough to break that bond. What's the alternative strategy the article discusses?
The counter-argument it presents is actually a more confrontational approach towards both of them.
Both Moscow and Beijing.
Yes. The thinking, drawing a parallel to Eisenhower's Cold War strategy, is that increasing military aid to Ukraine while also threatening China with serious economic consequences for supporting Russia, that could actually create more friction between Moscow and Beijing.
How so? By making Russia more costly for China to support.
Potentially. Aggravating their potentially divergent interests in Ukraine. China wants Russia not to lose, but maybe doesn't want to pay a huge price for it.
That sounds like walking a tightrope. Where does China actually stand now based on their actions?
It's definitely nuanced, as the article points out. Beijing seems keen on Russia avoiding a total collapse, but they're also clearly hesitant to bear major costs themselves.
So no weapons, but maybe other support.
Pretty much. They've largely held back on sending lethal military aid directly. And they've been trying, sometimes awkwardly, to navigate around sanctions, especially with their banks. It looks like they're trying to balance supporting a partner with protecting their own economic interests.
Okay, so wrapping this deep dive up, it feels like we've touched on a lot. The tension around Victory Day, the rejected ceasefire, the safety warnings.
Then the whole financial argument from AEI that helping Ukraine might actually be cheaper for the U.S. long term.
Right. And the political shifts like the Trump-Zelenskyy meeting fallout earlier this year.
Yeah.
And the mixed reactions to that.
And finally, this really complex, maybe deepening relationship between Russia and China and how difficult it seems to be to influence that from the outside. It's a lot of moving parts.
Definitely. It feels like a very uncertain moment with so many factors pulling in different directions.
Absolutely. The motivations, the potential strategies, the possible outcomes for everyone involved, Russia, Ukraine, the US, China, Europe, they're all incredibly complex and frankly could change quickly.
So maybe the final thought for you listening to this is, considering everything we've just discussed, the symbolism of May 9th, the different takes on ceasefires, the U.S. financial stake, the Russia-China dynamic, where do you think this conflict might be heading in the next few months?
And thinking about all those competing interests and potential consequences, what role can or should the international community realistically play going forward? It's certainly something to mull over.
Yeah, definitely food for thought. And if you want to dig deeper,
We really encourage you to check out some of the sources we mentioned: Bloomberg, Asia Times, Robert Lansing Institute, AP. They offer a lot more detail to help you form your own view.